Why don't we start this morning's lecture? Yeah. Okay. So I scrapped my lecture today. It was going to be continuing some of the contemporary history of the Austrian School of Economic Thought. But I changed it. I want to discuss this lecture is going to be titled Truth, Freedom, and Fear. So I'll keep this lecture kind of a Socratic style lecture. Please, if you have any questions or comments, I would love to conversate and discuss any ideas. So you can type it in the chat, and then Ethan will see it, and he can raise your question to me, and we can discuss. But as well, I kind of want to introduce myself. My name is Matthew Geiger. I studied under Dr. Darren at Occidental from 2016 to 2020. In 2018, he sent me to the Mises University at the Mises Institute. I met some friends. They recommended I study in Spain with Jesus Huerta de Soto, Philip Bagus, and the Austrian community in Madrid, which is very strong. They definitely keep the Spanish scholastic tradition alive and well, even after the fall of the Spanish Empire. But there I wrote my master's thesis, The Economics of Suicide, and currently working on that as my PhD dissertation. So I want to ask, why are we here? Why are we studying Austrian economics? And I would keep that open-ended, but it's my belief that we are studying truth. That's what we're looking to discuss. And in the modern age, we still debate what truth is. For example, people will vouch that the scientists have made one claim, therefore this is the end-all be-all. But this is kind of a ridiculous idea of what science is and what the use of science is for. Science is, on one hand, if it's in the physical sciences, it's to run tests, to test empirical claims and either verify or falsify such claims. And to some extent, some scientists say we really don't ever come to full conclusions. We kind of just have these accepted hypotheses, and we run with those. So science is contestable, but more specifically, and this is more of a phenomena of our contemporary politicized age that we live in, that the thesis of Hans-Hermann is that under democracy, things become more politicized as people have to continuously vote for certain policies every X amount of years. It becomes all the more important that people sort of begin to investigate political policies and what is going to influence them in certain ways and what other policies are going to affect them in other ways. Not only that, it's also policies of you versus perhaps your neighbor. So people become politicized, and as I believe his name was Hans Oppenheimer, but Oppenheimer discussed the idea that there's two ways to accumulate wealth, one being the economic means, the other being the political means. Economic means being the mutual gain that people can engage in. The political means being that of essentially exploitation, of conquest, of accumulating wealth via taxation, confiscation, etc. So in this politicized society, the essence of what people are trying to achieve is money and power. And a byproduct is control of policies, of people. So the most important, I would say, political apparatus for monopolization is that of money. If you can monopolize money and you have the power to produce money, then you can use the money to essentially influence your own wills and wishes into society. If you look at modern academia, a lot of us are college students, and we go into college thinking that this is for the pursuit of ideas and to discuss ideas, very much in a Socratic style. But usually this is not the case. My own experience being at college was somewhat of a knife fight. People yelling, people criticizing, shaming. And honestly, I did cower to some extent as far as like compromising my own values and beliefs because I didn't know how to navigate those situations. But in hindsight, I can realize that it was all a lot of fear mongering and shaming people and students for alternative ideas. Because the academics today, they're intellectually arrogant, and that's what leads them to be more tyrannical, because they want this cushy position as well as to lord over the other faculty and other students. So the other issue with modern academia is the influence of money. A lot of research grants, they are funded via, I guess, state departments and whatnot. So, for example, if I'm looking to do some research, if what I'm proposing to research and investigate is more potentially dangerous, then I can get a bigger grant. So think of testing bat coronaviruses or climate change. The more dangerous these things are and existentially a threat to society, the more money I can have, because this is a more important matter to do research on. Not only that, as a climate scientist, I will have more prestige in society as being someone who's more important. The research I'm doing is more important. If it turns out that climate change is not as big of a deal as people make it out to be, then the importance of my own work is going to be marginal. And I think a lot of academics tend to be threatened by these certain ideas and the certain vulnerability they have in not being able to have this funding to kind of sustain themselves, let alone their social stability. So now I would like to discuss a little bit of the idea of freedom. And I think where we find ourselves is really in a transitional period. If you guys aren't familiar with Peter Boss's book, The Road to Freedom, I think we have a link to it through our website, but I highly recommend that book. And in it, he has this graph, which I haven't seen lately, but it's this idea of three or exponential freedom in the sense that, like, if you look at human history, it tends towards freedom. And I forget exactly how the use of like three is incorporated to that, but once you see the graph, you'll know what I'm talking about. So slavery in the US was abolished in 1865. And I think right now we still have a form of slavery that's not necessarily with chains and is a legalized or legitimized slavery or physical slavery, but it's a slavery of the mind, of the spirit. And so I think also part of this is this idea of taxation and money production that leads people into a form of debt slavery. So I think the next major revolution for human freedom will be with a monetary revolution, because only when you have monetary sovereignty will you have individual sovereignty. If you don't have monetary sovereignty, if someone else has a higher claim to your income, they can essentially undermine the fruits of your labor, steal you of your savings or earnings, and then you're essentially pauperized. This is why inflation wipes out the middle classes. The people who, the welfare for the billionaires or the corporations, they get richer and the poor get poorer. So this is a politically induced inequality. On one hand, inequality is natural and a part of life as people are born in different places and have different aptitudes. But there is a politically induced inequality. You'll never hear people on the left discuss this idea. They just say inequality is bad, income inequality is bad, and they want redistribution to help the less fortunate members of society. But they never investigate politically induced inequality, which I believe is one of the biggest factors to the inequality that they're observing today. So we discussed this idea yesterday on fear and the history of more primitive societies as they enter into civilization, and the idea of Thomas Hobbes that people kind of relinquish some of their freedoms to the state to protect them from human nature and being at each other's throats. And so I looked up the etymology of fear, and it comes from the word danger. So this danger, this idea that primitive society nature, there will be tigers and bears and wolves chasing us, perhaps is true. There is a danger to nature. But now in the contemporary cosmopolitan civilization that we live in, we don't experience these external dangers of the natural wilderness to this extent. But there still is a danger. And I do think that the danger is not necessarily so much your common man as it is the state. It's not this horizontal danger of your neighbor. That's why we need the police to settle domestic conflicts, which in some aspect there are domestic and neighborly conflicts that we need to resolve. But again, we will get into private security and how these can be resolved and disputed without the state. The real threat is the state. This is the danger. This is the paradigm shift that, if you look at Rudolf Rommel, his work, Democide in the 20th century, anywhere from 170 to 220 million people were murdered at the hands of their own state. In my own research, I came across this book from the 1950s by Just Mirlo called The Rape of the Mind. And he discusses this term called menticide. And menticide is the murdering of one's mind, usually via torture, torturing someone so bad that they like kill themselves, they regress in their mind, and perhaps they end up committing suicide. So this is kind of the middle of the spectrum between suicide and murder, or genocide and democide, is menticide, the killing of one's mind. So this is why he refers to it as the rape of the mind. And in the physical outer world, there has been conquest. People have been at each other's throats, and they've tried to physically dominate people. There has been physical rapes historically. But in the academic world, I think a lot of it is this intellectual raping. A lot of the students, they are indoctrinated because they don't know, on one hand, how to think for themselves, and two, they succumb to the culture of the academic institutions and the ideas that prevail there. So in one sense, as like a martial art or jujitsu is a way to protect yourself from someone trying to attack you or rape you, I think what we're trying to help teach is your own mental rape defense, how to prevent these ideas from entering your mind, because a lot of these ideas are like a virus. The ideas of socialism, of exploiting people who are different. As Mises said, every socialist is a disguised dictator. And what does a dictator do? He can become a tyrant. He can try to control and hurt people. A lot of leftists, followers of Marxists, communists, they recognize that they would murder more wealthy people in society. They don't have a hesitation about these certain ideas. So if you want to live in a civilization that is peaceful and prosperous, you have to be able to combat them ideologically. And not only that, I feel vindicated by wanting to, I guess, if someone tries to intellectually rape me and my mind, rape my mind by their ideas of socialism, of cronyism, of militarism, of me wanting to give up my life for some central bankers, then I feel like I have the right to propose my ideas. And in fact, if I offer the truth and it turns out to rape someone's mind because they can't hold uh, the light of truth, then then so be it. This is, I think, the cultural development that we find ourselves in academia, in the intellectual world. It's a battle of ideas, and it is to some degree cutthroat. So I think as people studying Austrian economics, a lot of the treaties have been developed, but we need people that are courageous to discuss these ideas and to speak the truth. And it does come at the cost of fame and fortune. Look at Mises, look at Rothbard, these people who gave up lofty positions and opportunities because it was based on things that they didn't believe in. Good morning. Welcome. This is my mom. So just to catch you guys up to where we are at, my lecture is on truth, freedom, and fear. And we're discussing that what we're here to do is to pursue truth. As a byproduct of pursuing truth, I think we will come to the conclusions of freedom and investigating what freedom is. And in essence, we will, I think, if you find truth, you will be spiritually free because you will have that peace of knowing what the truth is. And moreover, you won't be deluded in the logic of the world, both externally and intellectually and theoretically. You won't confuse cause and effect. Why certain things are happening in society. You'll have liberals and conservatives both giving you alternative reasons why certain things are happening. But I think if you can investigate cause and effect as critically as you can, when it comes to things like what is occurring in civilization, then you will have the truth, and I think that can offer you some peace throughout your life. So I want to bring up some quotes. This is a quote from Michael Malice, who maybe will be a guest speaker, one of the pillars. But he said, "I'd rather Hitler be the CEO of Macy's than a leader of a nation." And what he's getting at is the idea that there are certain people in society who are sociopaths. They do want power. They do want to perhaps harm other people. But it's at what position can they obtain this power and utilize this power? If we have the state, then the opportunity remains for certain people to utilize the power of the state for their nefarious ends. So we were discussing that the fear has existed in nature. There have been predators, but as we entered into civilization, the state was saying that the fear is of your neighbor. They are the ones who can harm you. So we need to create the state, to create the police, to create justice and courts and institutions to protect you from these harmful threats. But the truth is that's not the real cause of the danger in society. The real danger of society is the state, their ability to print money, to exploit you, to tax you, to draft you into military service so you can give up your life to fight and die for central bankers, for friends of the state, people who make money not by producing goods and services, but by the snap of their fingers. So, and also the idea of democide, that the state has killed its own people. So this is the biggest danger that we face. And this is what the state is, an institution of socialism. Socialism is the exploitation of people. Mikhail Bakunin, I believe a 19th century anarchist, said, as long as the state exists, we cannot be truly free. And Lenin agreed with this. However, Lenin believed in a dictatorship of the proletariat as a necessary step before the state could wither away. So in our society, when we deal with people of the left or the progressive mindset, which is a euphemism for communism, they will agree in many regards as saying we want economic prosperity for people. Why should some people have less when other people have more? Can't we just redistribute the more, the haves, to the have-nots? And this is the significance and the importance of understanding economics, that what you use today for redistribution of wealth, you can't use tomorrow. If you undermine the entrepreneur and the ability to produce and generate more wealth, then this only becomes a decrease in the ability for the entrepreneur to innovate and become more productive in the future, all else being relatively equal. So we're going to obviously throughout this program get into more specific analysis of certain institutions, the function of the entrepreneur, the role of property, jurisprudence, security, all these things that are essential to a peaceful and prosperous society. But I think we need to disillusion ourselves of what the state is, its origins, and what it functions as. I don't know if you guys like the ancient Chinese from yesterday, but some people like the Chinese more than the physiocrats. So, but I think the Chinese insight was just so clear as to this is the government that governs least, governs best, in essence. And I think this is the idea that we kind of have to continue to develop upon, because in the 20th century, the century of scienticism and enlightenment, it became more atheistic, more agnostic. History was primarily religious, either Catholic or Protestant, or Islamic. But here, at least in our society, it's predominantly maybe a mix and atheistic, but it's also agnostic. But that tendency for religion hasn't gone away. It kind of evolved into science and believing that science is the truth objectively, and that whatever the scientists say is conclusive and decisive, and we need to follow that. So what we're doing here, philosophy, economics, is a science. The method is different. That's why the next pillar, when we discuss methodology, it's very important of discussing how we know what we know. How do we arrive at these certain conclusions? Um, um, I think another quote that I like from the anarchist Proudhon is that anarchy is the mother of order, not the daughter. The other paradigm shift that will really help us be less afraid of an anarcho-capitalist society is the nature of anarchy, the nature that it is just basically a relationship without a third party. What we're doing here is an anarchic relationship. There's no third party saying like, you have to be here, you have to sit down, you have to listen, you have to take notes. Maybe I could try to impose that, but to the extent that we don't have that, means that there is a harmony. And this is what anarchy is. It's the negation of a political hierarchy. The political hierarchy that exists in society is that you have to submit to the law. You have to submit to the decrees of what your tax rate is and pay that. We're going to discuss education and the institution of public education and how this is compulsory. Education being free and compulsory means that this is a form of child slavery. As Thaddeus Russell said, this is day prisons for children. Why? Because as we were discussing, you don't need to control people's bodies anymore. It's too costly. So slavery has evolved to control people's minds and their spirit. If you can free your mind and your spirit, then you can be free from all these ideas, because the state, it needs bodies. But instead of chains, you just have to control people's minds. So it's a much more effective form of slavery, of power, of control. And as we are in the post-technological revolution, with artificial intelligence, I think it's all the more important that we can strengthen our resolve towards freedom and free ourselves from this mind virus of submitting to control. Another good quote from Proudhon was that the great are only great because we are on our knees. Let us rise. I think that's a beautiful quote because, well, this is also to the concept of Ayn Rand saying that the world is not changed by the masses. It's changed by the few strong-willed individuals. And one author and economist, Edwin Regal, discusses this idea that in a democracy, in the politicized society, a lot of people are half alive. And what he means by this is that because we are not monetarily sovereign, we are not fully individually sovereign. So we don't actually yet experience full freedom in our lifetimes because we're still on this schedule of having to pay rents, pay taxes. We're not free from the schedule that people impose on us. Only then, I think, will we really be able to experience freedom, but also leisure. There's a certain stress and financial anxiety that kind of like permeates in people. Even in the politicized society, like this is a nice neighborhood, but if you go to certain parts of Los Angeles or New York, when you're walking, it's like a code yellow. You're kind of on staying alert from the potential harms that may come your way. So the justification for society is we need to protect you from harmful people. But in a free privatized society, I think you would be able to kind of exclude these more harmful, threatening people. They wouldn't be like free to just be on the streets. So this is one distinction that like theoretically we can kind of conceptualize and imagine, but it in a way helps us kind of really analyze and investigate what society we're currently living in and the nature of it. So yeah, let me take so far any questions or any ideas you would like me to discuss and develop further at the moment.
What differentiates social anarchists from anarcho-capitalists? You mentioned social anarchists.
Yes, I think the
Is it like a socialist origin or a market origin? Anarchist.
well, historically, anarchism and anarchists did come from the left and the socialist, communist variety. So I think it's mostly a difference in their means rather than their ends. The ends has been towards the abolition of the state and the dissolving, the withering away of the state for freedom. But the means are different. For the anarcho-capitalists, the economists, it has been a market dependent path to creating the market institutions alternatives for society rather than the state means. And for the socialist anarchists, the anarcho-communists, their means, like Lenin and followers of mostly Marxism, has been a dictatorship of the proletariat. They thought that with the abolition of private property and a revolution of the proletariat and in the means of production, we can achieve this communist utopia. Thinkers like Fourier and others had all these incredible ideas about what the communist utopia would deliver, what it would look like. They were saying that like you'd live in like, I guess, buildings, and there'd be like X amount of this and that. I don't know specifically, but the differentiation is, I believe, primarily through the means. Some believed in violent revolution to dissolve the state, and the anarcho-capitalists believe more in the market means, in a peaceful revolution, a monetary revolution, removing the power of the state via undermining their ability to print money and essentially redistribute power from the people. That's the essence of money production. And this is why I think this institution of money production is the most important, because it really does fund, I think, some of the worst phenomena that we experience in our modern society. I don't know if you guys were here, but I mentioned that a lot of leftists will claim that there's inequality in the world. There absolutely is inequality, but there's politically induced inequality with money production and essentially monetary redistribution in this form. And this politically induced inequality is not something the leftists ever discuss. They never mention it. I've never heard them mention it. That the state imprinting more money, giving it welfare to the corporations and the billionaires, is harming and pauperizing the middle classes. So we can see beyond this fallacious paradigm that corporations are exploiting consumers and they're just rent-seeking. And to the quote of Michael Malice saying, I'd rather Hitler be the CEO of Macy's than rather the leader of a nation. Because if you're a CEO, you do have, in essence, this soft power over society. But if you're the leader of a nation and you have legal backing and the police with guns to back and impose your laws, then you have some real power over society. And then you back the corporations and you can kind of direct society into this corporatist, fascist welfare warfare state, which is what we currently have. This is not a product of capitalism. A lot of leftists as well will say, oh, what we're experiencing is late stage capitalism. This is not capitalism at all. This is corporatism. This is the worst phenomena of the existence of the state and the businessman merging together, creating what's called crony capitalism. So what we're experiencing is not necessarily the products of pure capitalism, but of interventionism, creating these distortions. To correct for these distortions, they do further interventions until step by step you arrive at socialism and the undermining and destruction of our society and civilization. I mentioned before you guys arrived that a little bit of introduction. My current research, my doctoral dissertation, is the economics of suicide and how certain institutions of the state produce more suicidality than what otherwise would occur in a free society. So the real danger is the ability to print money, and it comes from the state in essence. And that one quote of the Chinese that that the function of the state is not to protect people. It's in essence to protect itself at the cost of people. When we discuss institutions, we're going to look at militarism. In the 18th century, there was a disciplinarian revolution. The whole idea of the state was to protect people, but then they flipped it. They said, actually, to be a good citizen is to give up your own life, to fight and die for the state. So they made the citizenry protect the state. This is what war has become. It's like an ideological manipulation, a retardation of what the whole point of a society is supposed to be. Why am I supposed to live a good life and the state's supposed to protect me if then they ask me to give up my life for the state? Not only that, the whole idea of the draft is the undermining of all freedoms. If they have a right to draft you, to take you, then you don't have a right to your body and a right to your life, let alone property. So this is why the draft is one of the worst evils. It undermines all freedom, all rights, and anyone who's a draft dodger should be praised as a hero, in my opinion. So I think that's good for now. I would like to stop there, but thank you very much. Yes.
Just take 2 minutes break, man.
I have a question.
Oh, okay, question.
You can use the microphone too.
Yeah, so I have a question. Like you mentioned that you are doing like your like dissertation in the studies of the suicide. Like there's I don't know like any more like government institutions that affects that in Japan that I think that has like the highest like suicide rates in the world. But like I want to know like
Yeah, I haven't investigated Japan that much, but I do know the culture is, I believe, like extremely focused on work and discipline in this sense. I mean, Ethan, perhaps you would know more than me. No, like, uh, uh, but there is a high suicide rate in Japan. They work a lot. Uh, I'm not sure, but my feeling is a lot of it may come from like this Puritan work ethic. After World War II, the United States, I think, influenced a lot of their Reconstruction, and maybe Thaddeus Russell. He is one of our associate professors. He may lecture, but he discusses this a lot. That the Puritans, uh, they had two main ethics: the Puritan work ethic, that you must work and you must love your work, whatever you get for it, and that's what makes you a good, godly citizen, and the anti-sex ethic. A lot of the Japanese men, they have declining birth rates. Their population is decreasing because, one, they're not having children, and two, because they're not having sex, and they're working a lot. And I think that type of existence, and again, I haven't looked too closely into Japan society, but I think that's obviously what drives a lot of them to like existentially being like, holy shit, my genes are ending with me. And so then what's the meaning for their existence? And I think a lot of them come to the conclusion that, yeah, like maybe, yeah, they become nihilistic. And I think that's why a lot of them commit suicide. To the extent that the state is involved, I know there was an issue with Japan's economy or something like that. I'm not too familiar with the situation, but I will look more into it. So, yeah, you can always look at probably the state is involved and in some regards has an effect that's more detrimental than beneficial to societies. But suicide is multivariable. It can happen for many reasons: sadness, heartbreak, frustration. But when it comes to financial anxieties, these social influences, I think a lot of that does essentially come from the state.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question from Dumo.
Hi, Debo. We can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Forgot to. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it's a kind of a different question that I want to ask is, as Austrian economic deals with the marginal utility, so I was thinking what's its thought about property rights, like in modern economic sense, or like in basic economy, property rights is a special thing that is mentioned and discussed upon. So I was thinking what's its thought process upon property rights and how it deals with efficiency in the market, or does it have a, what's the view of it from Austrian economic point?
On property rights?
Yeah.
Property rights are essential. They're the foundation for all rights. All rights are property rights. So if you want to live freely, you need to have the right to your life. The right to your life is a form of property rights. If you want to be an artist, to be free to artistically express yourself, you have to own yourself. So property rights are foundational, no pun intended. They're fundamental to all other rights, and that's the main issue with the state is that it's a violation of property rights. Its whole existence is a contradiction to protecting property because it says, well, we're funded by taxation, so this institutionalized coercion on your income is a violation of your property. You don't get to decide how much you're willing to pay for police. So this institution, yeah.
Sorry for that. Basically,
Yeah.
the question was,
Sure.
sorry. Okay. So basically, the question was from that point of view, as like earlier yesterday, it was discussed that free market is the goal, and like free market is the main essence of like Austrian economics deals with free market. So if there is no state or central authority, yeah, I absolutely oppose that there should be a central authority. But how, if there is no central authority, how the efficiency of the market or the economy is dealt upon in Austrian economics? Like if everybody has the choice to open up a shop, or let's say a business on their own, and the market operates on its own, there is a thought process that efficiency might get lower or something. So I was thinking about that.
Well, okay. So again, it's a question of efficiency as a matter towards what end, right? So you can have a culture, a society that wants to try, more different foods, and that extent, a market economy for alternative restaurants is going to be more efficient than a central authority determining, what type of restaurants should exist and where they should be located. It will be less efficient because when you have multiple minds, this is the knowledge problem, the coordination problem, is that the market will determine what types of restaurants people actually want, and this is the essence of society. You can be efficient, right? Like they said, they made the trains run on time in Nazi Germany or Russia, but again, it's to what end is this for? If you are trying to be efficient in murdering people, you can be more efficient than in a free society. A free society will lead to more peace and prosperity, but if that's not your end, then yeah, central authority arguably can be more efficient in those means of war and destruction. But perhaps I don't know if that answered the question. I will say a good quote by Randolph Bourne is that war is the health of the state, right? So everything becomes a war. We have to wage a war on poverty. We We have to wage a war on drugs. We have to wage a war on an invisible threat, existential threat, namely a virus. This is why progressives like the military, because it militarizes society. That's what COVID was essentially an experiment in. And the efficiency to what end is really like a subjective determination. So if you're a statist, then you want state power, but if you want more peace and prosperity, then I think the means of the market will be more efficient in that regard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question.
Yes. Okay. Implementing. What is my thought on the spread of radical Islam and the way they are implementing political systems? Implementing political systems? Intervening in political systems?
No, like when they are when they take over a new country and then they set up a new government, like
No.
it tends to be like autocratic governments or. But what do you think is related to this growth and like why is it manifesting this way? And how? I just think that it's being successful and it shouldn't. That's my idea about it.
And it shouldn't. I think it's successful because you have policies that are essentially subsidizing and influencing more immigrants, specifically Islamic immigrants, to a lot of the European countries, perhaps even in the United States. But I think it's a basic idea that when you feed pigeons, you get more pigeons. If you open the borders, as well as offering subsidies for people to come in, then you're going to have more immigration. To the extent specifically with radical Islam, I think theoretically, it's just an idea, a concept, an issue of border policy. But I don't know. I don't have a specific take on radical Islam. I will say that if you were a type of person to want to combat radical Islam, war is not the means. If anything, it's the idea of blowback that 10 minus 2 equals 20. Through war, you actually don't create less radical Islamists, you create more. So the way to actually counteract radical Islam is to not engage in war, but just continue to produce what the United States produces, which is mass media and pop culture. If you look at, I believe in Iran, they started watching the Kardashians. A lot of them are like taking off the hijab and whatnot. They're becoming westernized, not through force, but through culture. So culture, in essence, is the way to change society from the ground up, rather than top down imposition. And so this is the means of peace and peaceful revolution versus political means of war and overthrowing. That only leads to more catastrophe, only more radical Islam and Islamophobia. Did that answer the question to some degree? I hope that can help.
Yes, faithfully.
Yeah, it was a great answer, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So if there's no more questions, I think we will take probably 5 to 10 minute. Yes, one more question.
Ms. Roberts' population.
Well, like the Malthusian trap. So Malthus, his idea, his theory, I believe, was prior to the Industrial Revolution, if I'm not mistaken. I don't recall exactly when Malthus was around. But I think the idea is somewhat sound. Perhaps it's a bit simplistic, but maybe some of the best ideas simplify what is actually a real life phenomena. That, you know, if resources are scarce at a certain level, the population increases, there's less available resources per person, then people fall into a society of scarcity and population decreases. As there's more relative resources per person, per capita, then the population will begin to increase again. But then the Industrial Revolution really undermined that. As we created more resources for more people, population began to increase more. I think, and my professor Jesus Huerta de Soto thinks that when we have the withering away of the state is completely like keeping us so impoverished we don't even know. We would be exponentially more wealthy. We actually could see a world 20 billion, 40 billion people. I think, yeah, it's totally possible. But this is like the state keeps us impoverished. We would be so much more wealthier right now than if we had a socialized and larger state that extracts our wealth. Yeah, was that sufficient or specific? No, I believe in that we have available resources, but they're not able to be adequate. This is a problem of interventionism, is that when you socialize resources, you create shortages or surpluses. So, for example, in California, the state running the water supply is always saying like, conserve water, do your part, take less long showers. But we have a freaking ocean. We have water, we have resources. It's just that the state has not the right means to allocate these resources appropriately. So obviously we have traffic because of the monopolization of the roads. We don't have like peak load pricing. When you have prices for things, then we can efficiently allocate resources. That's why, you know, in times of crises, they call it price gouging, but it's the only means to efficiently allocate resources in those times until you can, you know, escape the crisis. No, actually, I think some people are pointing to like an underpopulation problem, but the state being what the state is, no matter how low the population, they can always say there's an overpopulation. So this is the whole the evil of the state, that if they had, as Yuri Maltsov said, if there was a local butcher, then the butcher would be butchering. Yeah, they will say there's an overpopulation, and that's how they justify, you know, cutting resources to people, not helping people. We'll get into socialized medicine, and I think that's why socialized medicine is the first target for all socialists, because if they control, you know, your ability to live or not to live, they control you, and that in hand with public education, that's the essence of slavery. But yeah, we can discuss that one another time. Yes.
Nice question. Yeah, you know what? Can you explain a little bit more about the differences between taxes and tariffs and the pros and cons of both?
Okay. So taxes are. Can we mute? Is that okay? Is that possible? I don't know if he's asking a question or talking. Thank you. Jesus Huerta de Soto defines taxes as institutionalized exploitation. And so, hi, Mark, welcome.
To it's in my pocket for me, and that run out late.
Yeah, no worries. I'm answering one question.
Yeah, Colin, we have time because it's finishing up now. We're going to take 5 minutes break and we'll explore.
So I can park.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for being on time. You know, it's home, guys.
We're taking this.
So this is the idea of what a tax is. It's institutionalized robbery. If I pull a gun on you and I say, give me your money, you give me your money, this is robbery. But if I pull a gun on you and I say, give me your money, and then I continuously to do this. This is the nature of taxation. But they just say, like, what's the threat of if you don't pay a tax? Imprisonment at the point of a gun. Police officer will say, get in the cage. So taxes are essentially institutionalized theft. Do they go to pay for services? Yeah, in essence, they do. But if you're in prison, you know, the work you do can somehow pay for the prison guard to keep you imprisoned. What a tariff is essentially a price on a trade. It's another form of a tax. As Misa said, all exchange is foreign exchange. Whether I exchange with my neighbor or someone in Afghanistan, it's all foreign exchange. The issue with the tariff is that it produces nothing for society. People defend tariffs saying, well, it creates jobs. Yeah, it creates jobs, but less productively. So now prices for these goods increase. So if we wanted to buy shoes and they were made in Afghanistan, they would be at one price. If now we have to domestically produce them, not at our comparative advantage with higher costs of expenses, and it's less productive, the cost goes up for shoes. So now the consumers are no better off. In fact, they may be worse off because we have to pay higher prices for the same goods than we were previously paying. So tariffs are just a form of disrupting the economy and the prosperity that we otherwise would have. And furthermore, there's a saying that when goods don't cross borders, soldiers do. It's one step towards war, towards militarism. It's a negation of the market, and what the market does is it creates an interdependence, more specialization, more peace and prosperity for people. So, as an economist, I'm not in favor of taxes or tariffs. Yeah, it disrupts the market, makes it more inefficient, and is a step towards war.
Are there any benefits to either of those that you see?
Well, I mean, the case with Trump, it was interesting because it was like a 4D chess move, but to some extent, I think that was like luck and asserting some form of dominance that may have helped in his favor, but I don't think it's a defense of tariffs. I think just circumstantially, that was kind of the case. People think, okay, so if you want your population to work more, if you're in favor of the Puritan work ethic, then go ahead, be in favor of tariffs. This is what autarky is self-production, self-determination, not relying on society and other people to produce goods and services, but relying on yourself. And then you make it for your own economy, your own country. If you want people to pay higher prices and work more, then yeah, that's the benefit of a tariff. But if you're in favor of the market, then no.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you guys. We'll take a break.